I know what you're thinking. What's he drinking? Remember, as I said on my spiritual discussions, no alcohol. It's organic apple cider vinegar with the mother in it. I try to drink this not every day, but as often as occasion permits. I'm going to turn on another light here. I think it'll help a little bit. And I think I'll get rid of one other light. We're winging this tonight, so I knew I'd have to make a few last minute adjustments. Let's see if that helps any, so you can see things a little better. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Much better. Much better. Got all my things here. Boy, we could talk about that, couldn't we? That situation with the Intel community, what we're finally getting out now. And I guess it's better late than never. But as I've said, Intel community is our most dangerous domestic enemy. And they have really, really messed our country up. And I'm not going to get into politics tonight, at least not directly. I think every once in a while, as I've said on a number of occasions, we need to step away from that and talk about what's really important. And talk about what's really important, I decided that this was such an important video that I'm not just live streaming it, I'm recording it on a video camera at the same time. Never know what's going to happen to the channel. And this particular subject, as most of you know who've been waiting for the last couple of weeks, I said that I was waiting for some inspiration, some insights, and some other things that I could present this information and have it interest you, and more importantly, inspire you to really go on that search for yourself. Yes, we need to know what's going on in the world. We can't put that aside completely. We have to know who the enemies are. We have to know who our friends are, or hope we know. But the most important thing that we can do is get to know ourselves and our loved ones, and of course, the creator that put it all together. And then you say, well, why did he make this place such a mess? Well, that's kind of out of the subject matter of this little discussion tonight, but maybe sometime in the future we'll get to it. I really, really have backed off a lot because I mean, what else can I say? I've said everything that I possibly can. I've warned everybody about what's happening with this government and in the world generally. And I'm such a small voice that it's like crying out in the middle of the desert. That old saying. If no one's around to hear a tree fall, did it make any noise? And I gotta admit, that's a lot how I feel, and not that I'm in need of having a lot of followers or a lot of influence or anything, but I've tried to do the best I can with getting the information out there to help people that are willing to listen to act upon it. And of course, I'm not so concerned. I'm not concerned about build. I mean, it'd be nice to make money off YouTube and other places, but I knew they'd cause me a problem in the end anyway. So I never monetized. I don't advertise here. I've shown my books and some of those things, but uh, this wasn't a money making endeavor for me. It was to be a voice of warning. And so it's not right. I mean, it's okay for people to charge on their channels. I'm not, to have some type of income. I'm not against that. I just knew I couldn't do it because if I did, and I've said this before, if I did, it would be used as an accusation against me and really interfere with what I was trying to say, what I am trying to say. So at any rate, let me take another sip of this here. Hopefully we don't lose this connection tonight. Again, like I say, that's why I'm recording this as well on a separate camera. And I'm using the local internet and Wi-Fi connection right now, okay? I'm not using the phone service, which sometimes is better, sometimes it isn't. But tonight I thought I'd go ahead and try to use the internet service here at the house and the Wi-Fi. I'd like to have it directly connected. That would make it even better. But with the system that I have available to me right now, I have to use my phone camera, as I've told you before. Um, that's just not a possibility. Okay, enough of all of that. Hopefully, we've got some people coming in. Looks like we've got around a little over 100 now, I suppose. Uh, let me start off by saying that, I've mentioned, and I've tried to teach that there are meanings in the Hebrew language that even the scholars don't get. I've shown you Gesenius, the Hebrew lexicon. I've shown you Strong's, the where you can go look up the Hebrew and the Greek words in those languages and see what they mean. But even those translations are based upon hundreds and sometimes thousands of years of tradition, forgetting the original culture. I mean, Gesenius did a pretty good job, but he was still tied down by the traditionalist Christian requirements of his day. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't have sold his books. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You see, I don't have to worry about that. And so I told you that the Hebrew letters mean more than just our alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that make up our words. The individual letters don't really have a meaning. There are people out there who will say there's a gematria to it. Well, there is a mathematical formula in every language to some extent, okay? So, but I'm not here to argue about that. The gematria that you see in other languages like English in particular really isn't the same thing as what the Hebrew can do. Now, you also know that I don't hold, and this, of course, gets a lot of people very frustrated. I don't hold this Bible up as being the immutable, inerrant Word of God in every aspect. It can't be. I'm a historian. I know a lot of things about the background of this. I've talked about, for instance, Dr. Robert Eisenman and his investigation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I understand that there are certain peoples, let me put it that way so I don't get the algorithm upset, certain peoples in the world that think that they're chosen and that they should have special privileges and they can do whatever they want and it'll be okay, even bad things. Those political altercations and machinations happened in the Bible, and things that seem to be by God may or may not be, and you need to have a firm foundation on what the language is and the culture of the time, even the history, to really understand what's happening. Frankly, there are a lot of things in Shakespeare, as I've said before, that offer almost the same type of counsel that the Bible does. The big exception, of course, being who's the God, right? Well, I'm just talking about principle. And a lot of people will say, well, if you don't talk Jesus and if you don't accept Jesus and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you're lost and you don't know where you're going and all of that. And I've taken great pains to explain that the idea of Jesus is a principle more than a personality. I've taken a lot of time over the years in the entire religion series that you can, I call it a religion series, it really isn't. It's a spiritual study series. Maybe I'll change that on the playlist instead of religion series, spiritual study series. But at any rate, in that and in the Eisenman series, and from time to time on different videos that I've done, and comments on Twitter, a lot of which I've made in the last little while. I've been off Twitter as well, although I've been on that, of course, quite a bit compared to what I've done on YouTube in the last 2-3 weeks. And I'm probably going to back off of YouTube even more, okay? Just so you know. But at any rate, so there are things that you can get into in the Hebrew, and there are some other languages. There's these arguments about where did Hebrew come from? Did it come from the Phoenician and move over into the Hebrew? Are there any ties to Sumerian, which really wasn't an alphabet? The Sumerian texts, the cuneiforms and all that were not anywhere near an alphabet type of system. We really see that right around the situation with Genesis, really, with that being written, and we're not really sure if it was written until many centuries later, but that's another argument that I'm not going to get into tonight. My point is that despite some of the possible problems, which you can find anybody's willing to talk about, oh, the Bible's not, that's nothing about God or whatever. I say you have to be careful with it, but I do see divine, even godly influence in it. And I'm going to show you some of that tonight. I've talked about the Hebrew letter, as I said a few minutes ago, isn't just a sound, isn't just a phonetic. It has an intrinsic meaning to it. Just as an example, the letter Bet, the second letter in the Hebrew alphabet, means house, for example. It doesn't just have the phonetic sound of b, right? And even though it has the numeric value of 2, it can also have other numeric values depending upon its context. I'm not going there tonight. I'm just making sure that you understand that this thing is bigger than most people realize. I'm not Jewish, as most of you know. Okay, I'm not. I do believe I'm a Semite, and I think I can prove that. Knowing this is a good example. I once had a friend who was quite a guy, and he studied Egyptian and Hebrew and Greek, and saw some things that were happening amongst some scholars, and he got kind of upset at them because they were saying, of course, that they knew it all, and the fact of the matter was all they were doing is spouting the same thing that these people have been spouting historically, linguistically, even religiously for hundreds and thousands of years without any real new understandings from it. Well, if God spoke, say 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, where is he today? People say, well, I pray to him, he speaks to me all the time. Okay, what new things did you learn? God doesn't want you to stand still. God doesn't want you to remain static. You're not going to jump into, the higher orders. And I don't mean like Masonic stuff, but I mean in the heavenly realms, merely because you want it. You have to perform to some extent. And if you just rely on somebody else to do it for you, you're not going to make it. And I don't care who that other person is, even Jesus. Give you an example. Let's say you're in 10th grade in high school, and you're studying algebra, and you don't get it. Or you just don't want to get it. You're just too lazy. You figure that there's an easier way to get through this class. So you hand your homework to a friend or even to one of your parents, let's say, and they do your work for you. Are you learning it? Are you having the experience that you're supposed to have? And when the test comes, finally, you're not going to be able to pass it. Grace has its limitations for you and for everyone. You got to be in the game. You've got to be in there trying. Struggling. Working out your salvation with fear and trembling. And I don't like quoting Paul, but he's kind of right on that one. All right, let's get into the meat of this. You all know there are a lot of crazy things happening right now. Again, I don't want to get into all the political stuff tonight. That's not my purpose. My purpose is this. And I know that looks daunting. I have no doubt, but we're going to get into it. They are attacking the very core and foundation of mankind. Not just with the extant treatments and all that, but with psychological and influential operations, even to our children. When I had my case back in the 80s, a lot of you will know what I'm talking about. If you don't, go into the playlist and you'll see what I'm talking about there. And I'm going to mention a little bit here, only because it impacts on what we're going to discuss. When I had my case, and I could quote quite a bit from this, but I'm not going to do that. That's not my purpose, as I said. There were a couple things that happened during my case. And it's interesting how things change in a few years, depending upon who is trying to defeat you, who is trying to control you. They say you have to answer to them. You should know who I'm talking about. You may feel that you have to answer to God and have a reasonable way to get along with the world. But the world doesn't like that. And what they will do is they will do everything they can to destroy you and to destroy your family, destroy your children, destroy your relationships, your friendships, and even in the end, kill you. So now we see the government, and it's the government, not just our institutions like, corporate institutions or educational institutions or even ecclesiastical institutions, but governments. I mean, there are some states and places that are standing up against this onslaught, this attack on the man-woman relationship and the fruit of that relationship, the children. There are a few standing up, but not many. Let me read to you what the court said, what the government said in my case back in 1980. Let's see, this was actually in 1985 when they made this statement. I want you to hear this. And then ask yourself, well, where does this leave us today? This is in the opinion of the judge. Oh, this is my book. A lot of you may not know about this when you know about I Wed Three Wives, you know about the Crimson Thread. This was the compendium on my case. I discuss the district court decision, and I discuss the federal district court decision, and I discuss the Supreme Court decision in here. And so I recognized some things that were happening back then. One was they were putting me down and yet allowing promiscuity everywhere because those people didn't call it what I was calling it, which was, I was honoring these women. And I don't mean to get into all this, but you got to understand where we are today. So in those days, this is what they pushed. Okay, I want to read a couple things to you. This is the district court. Okay. Ask yourself if this is where the governments are pushing things today. Monogamy is inextricably woven into the fabric of our society. This is the government talking to me and to the world in 1985. It is the bedrock upon which our culture is built. What? They say that in 1985. What are they saying today? Everything but that. They call that a social construct today, and that it's evil. Let me read you another thing. By the way, this book is out of print. You can't get it. Okay. Now listen to this one. In exercising that right, the state exercising its rights to control you, they say, it represents the collective expression of moral aspirations, and there is an undeniable interest in ensuring that its rules of domestic relations reflect the widely held values of its people. Well, I certainly don't believe that the majority of the people of the United States are going for the things that we see happening right now. And yet, in 1985, the court said, let me repeat this, in exercising that right by the state, it represents the collective expression. They're saying that this is run by the collective expression of the widely held values of its people. In other words, the state will make decisions based upon its own interests, not yours. And they will change depending upon what their objectives are. In this case, to destroy as we are today. And actually, they started even back then. I'm not going to get into the details of that. But I've said, When I was rejected, what I was saying back in about the man-woman relationship back in 1982, 86, that time frame, if I was attacked on that at some point in time in the future, what we see happening now would occur. And I warned everybody the traditional values of Christianity were twisted and misunderstood. And I'm afraid it was done sometimes unwittingly, but many times wittingly. Let's get into the meat of this. As I said, we have things in the Hebrew that give us some insights. The title of this video is The Fortress. What? Interestingly, on the last couple of days, tragically actually, with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and NATO and the United States and all this, the Russians have had to put into play a program they call the Fortress. Well, that was, I didn't know they were going to do that, but you'll see where I get the name for this video here in the presentation. But just so you know, basically Kremlin, the Kremlin means the fortress, just so you know, okay, in Russian. Basically, it's the same thing. So I didn't come up with a name for that. It's just interesting it happened in the last couple of days here. The fortress, what is it? In Psalms 91:2, it says that God is our refuge and our fortress. And I think everybody would agree with that. Sometimes we wonder, where the hell is he? Or where the hell is God, if you don't like the masculine viewpoint of that. I'm not going to argue that right now. But, you know, what's going on in this particular existence here? Why is it? And this question has been asked by decent people for a long time. Why does evil succeed so much? And why do the innocent suffer so much? Well, I don't know that I can answer that definitively here. I'm not even going to try. But I do want to show you what the system is that God put into place, not these governments. Something else. He is our refuge, and he is our fortress. And he put into place something here that was to nurture us as we grow and mature and understand. The state thinks it can take your child from you because you want to raise it to be a child, growing up into an adult, going through the different phases of growing up where you need guidance to understand things. I saw a redheaded libertarian make a really good point. She said, you know, my son is out there pretending to be a giraffe or whatever animal it was. He's like 5, 6 years old. He's pretending to be a giraffe. And they're saying that kids that think there's something else should have drastic changes to them made. And if the parents interfere, they can be even arrested. You understand what I'm saying. I'm talking between the lines here. So Psalms 91:2 says, God is our refuge, but in our fortress. Well, what is this fortress? I mean, do you see him standing out there defending you against anything? Do you see that? What about all the people dying in Ukraine? What about the poor Polish girl? I saw this in the news the other day. A beautiful woman, 27 years old. She went from, let's see, where did she go? From Poland to Greece. Gorgeous girl, gorgeous girl. I don't know what her personality was like, but you know, guys kind of think, you know, the way they look is the way they are personality-wise, but that's another issue altogether. So she goes to Greece to work, and she has a boyfriend there, and she gets attacked, killed, and her body stuffed in some, like a trash can. Where was God then? Polly's asking if I'm drinking. Well, first of all, I've told you I don't drink when I do spiritual discussions, and this is apple cider vinegar with the mother in it. I think you need to go away, sweet Polly. You're interrupting my conversation. I was going to turn off the chat during this, then I decided not to. Maybe I should have. Turn it on later, but here we are. Psalms 91:2. So I've talked about the YHVH. You know, God revealed himself according to Genesis, or Exodus rather, to Moses and said, I am that I am. That's my name, right? Yeah, Asher, yeah, right? Which actually means I will be whom I will be, but we won't get into the syntax and the tenses and all that right now. But at any rate, eventually it comes down to the Yod He Vah He, as most of you know, as Jehovah. It's not how you say it. And people want to make a big deal about that. There's no J in Hebrew. I know that, but you know, people use it. Okay? Yeah, there is no J. It's a yes sound. So don't start arguing with me about that. Okay? I put it right here. God's pattern of his family structure, of his kingdom, of his truth, of his good news is in his name. Some of this is going to be a review from some of you, but we're going to go into a little deeper discussion here. Here's the Yod He Vah He right here. Yod He Vah He. Most of you know that as Yahweh or Jehovah. That's not how you say it in either case, but just so everybody knows, okay? Well, let me show you something. Now, in Hebrew, you know I've talked about this. The word for father in Hebrew is Ab. Ab. Aleph Beit. There it is right there. It means father. It means the head, Aleph, of the house. In a more religious sense or spiritual sense, it means God's house. God is the head of his house. All right? Mother is Aleph Mem. It means the holder of God's water. The water holds God. Now that's an interesting concept because Greg Braden has done some studies on the Hebrew language and along with our DNA makeup. And he came up with a correlation of God is in the body, in our DNA, in our cells. I'm not going there, but I'm just throwing that in for some other information. Son is Vav. So we have Ab being the Yod, the father, the He being the mother. The He is the female, is a female letter, and it actually has an opening here at the top, you can see, which is like the womb, you know, the birth canal. And it's which is Aleph Mem, that's mother, okay? Then under the Vav in Jehovah, YHV, the V, the Vav, that's the Ben, that's the son, and son is Beit Nun, which means God's Spirit in the house. Do you understand that? So when God says that he has a son, he's saying that that son is not only literally a son, but that he has his spirit, that male has God's spirit in him. He is God's son. He has God's spirit in him. And it's right in the letter. House of spirit. Bain is house of spirit. Now here's the interesting one. The He at the end of Jehovah is the Bat. See, this is father, mother, son, daughter. There are other correlations to this, which I've talked about in the past, but this is the one we're going to use tonight because it's the fortress. And it'll be easy to understand without expanding this too much and getting into other aspects of it. So just follow along with me here. So the He here, you have father, mother, son, then daughter. And this He is the Bat. Bat is daughter in Hebrew. Now there are some other words, but we're using these basic ones, okay? The very basic ones. It means holding on to yourself here. It means house of the cross. That should send chills up your spine. And if you let the scales fall from your eyes and the wax out of your ears, There's something going on here that you really need to understand why I am so adamant about protecting the man-woman relationship and preaching it the way I do, since they say I preach it. I'm not really trying to preach it, I'm just trying to teach the facts of the matter. House of the Cross. Now, in the modern, or I should say the block form Hebrew, which has been around since the Babylonian captivity, you don't quite get the essence of it. And a lot of people have come on my channel here and say, oh, you need to talk about the Paleo Hebrew. Well, not really, but I am going to touch on it tonight. The important thing here is this bait. These are kind of, you kind of understand, but what's this bait doing? What's this House of the Cross? What does a daughter do? She's married off. Hopefully she's not damaged goods. By the way, I might bring this up. It's kind of off subject, but a lot of people think that Leah, who was Jacob's first wife, remember Jacob, who became Israel, he worked 7 years to marry Rachel, his beloved. And when he got married and he went in the tent, he found out it was Leah and not Rachel. And he goes to Leah and Rachel's father and says, Laban, and he says, what have you done here? You've dealt treacherously with me. Well, he kind of did that before with Esau, but that's another story altogether. He kind of got paid back here. But it says that Leah had weak eyes. A lot of people think, she had a cross eye, she couldn't see straight, or, a wandering eye or something like that. That's not what it meant. The weak eyes in Hebrew culture, when they talk about that, it's a nice way of saying that she had lost her virginity prior to the marriage. In other words, she was damaged goods. She wasn't pristine, okay? So when Jacob goes into her and says, hey, wait a second, hi, I appreciate Lockhart perspective being here. Hi, Felicia. I'm getting into some detail tonight. And we haven't talked in quite a while. And like I said, this is the result of some of what's happened, okay? And there's more, but at any rate. So Leah, when it says that she had weak eyes, it meant that she wasn't let me, well, you know what I'm saying, right? In other words, she wasn't a virgin, all right? She had sex before in some way, shape, or form. And that's not entirely unlawful in the culture back then. I mean, we have this concept of fornication today that's really off center. But and I've talked about that ad infinitum on many fronts. But at any rate, the point is that's what it meant about Leah. Rachel, of course, had not, and so she became the beloved wife. Not that Jacob hated Leah; he certainly didn't. But at any rate, I just thought you might like to know that the term "weak eyes" means that she had lost her virginity prior to getting married. That's all it means. So anyway, we get back to the daughter here. But, by the way, if you add a yod right there in the middle, it's bait, which means house, which is kind of where we are anyway with all these, right? Bait, house, kind of an interesting thing. House of what? House of man. Man's first home, the womb, right? Well, at any rate, so we have a bait here and a tav. And what I want to show you, this tav, which means cross, basically, in Hebrew, is actually a formation of two other Hebrew letters. It's the formation of a resh, which is the front of the head. Looks like this if you can see me doing it. All right? It's the front of the head. That's what it's really kind of showing, is the front of the head, where you think, your cognitive abilities, your awareness, your conscience, your consciousness. And then it's made with an upside down vav, which means fix. Vav is a fixer. It's a nail. It's a fastener. So basically what it means is what? You're fastening consciousness. You engage in fastening consciousness. To whom? Well, Adam experienced it when he opened his eyes and he saw Eve. And he woke up. And the woman, which she will become, Isha, will have children, hopefully. So in the process, she's doing something to bring the spiritual into the physical and give it consciousness. Fixing consciousness in this. Fashion consciousness. And before I go down into the Paleo-Hebrew here, I want to go through these things which I've talked about to some extent before. Man is Ish, and I know this is kind of small. I had to fit it all on this small board. Hopefully you can take a snapshot of it and expand on it if you want. Woman is Isha. Again, we have a Yod in this one, fire, meaning life. And we have a Shin here, life, and the He, meaning the womb. For woman. Where's the fortress in all this? I've talked about the different ways of understanding Hebrew at other levels, the pardes, the different levels of meaning. It's not just the literal meaning or the storyline that you read. There's other information inside of there, and I've shown you that in my religion series before. And this is where we're going to go tonight. We're not going to use Natar, well, we are using Natarkon. There are several of them. There's Natarkon, there's Gematria, there's Tamura, and there's Thashrak. Tamura and Thashrak are very similar. We're going to do some Tamura and Thashrak here. What am I talking about? This is telling you what God's plan is. It's not just his name, it's his system, his plan for his children. It's what he is, it's what he promotes, and you can see it every day. Sometimes it's done very well, sometimes we don't do it so well. We're practicing. So, what we do is we're going to do a little Thashrak here. We're going to take this bait in the name of Father, Ab. We're going to take this bait and we're going to match it up with the second letter in the word for mom, mother, What we come up with is bait mem. What does that mean? Little sideshow here. You just got to tell you this. Does anybody know what Barack Obama means? It's a Semitic, and it's kind of balanced there between the Arabic and the Hebrew to some extent. Basically, what it means, and I'm sure this was not his real name. He was trying to become something. Barack Obama means blessed high place, blessed mountain, blessed fortress. Huh. You know how you get your surnames, right? I'm not going to go into that, but even if that is his surname, somebody really took a lot upon themselves. So we're going to use this, we're going to put this together, one word, use not just Notargon, but Thashrak, and we're going to take this letter Bait and this letter Mem, and it means fortress. So in the very name of God, showing Father, Mother, Son, Daughter, God tells you using Thashrak and Tamura that this is the fortress that he has placed here and elsewhere. This isn't the only place. This is his pattern he does everywhere. Before we came here, here, and after. This is mortality. A lot of people like to say that, you know, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. That's wrong. We are spiritual beings having a mortal experience, a beginning and an end to this existence. We've had other physical existences before, but they weren't mortal. That's probably going over some people's heads. I'm really talking about reincarnation. Okay. The point is, right in the Yod He Vav He, the Ab Am Ben Bat in Hebrew, right there, using Tamura Thashrak, we find out that this is God's fortress that He has given you. Barry. I know. I don't really care what his name is. I was just telling you what the Barack Obama means. Why is the hay on the end of this, if you can see it? Well, it's a feminine form. You know, we talk about the earth being a mother. We talk about the different things have a feminine form, even if they're not actually feminine. But that's the reason why that hay is there. It's the feminine form. The real word for fortress is bamah, but it's feminine, so that's where the hay comes from. It's bam is the fortress. So God's telling you that this system here is your best bet for protection, for getting through this life, for being able to conduct your affairs safely and profitably, and hopefully under moral guidance until something like the state steps in and tries to screw it up and to ruin it. Essentially destroy, again, the man-woman relationship. Another thing about this that you might want to know, using Thashrak Tamora, we can take the the aleph here, okay, and this noon here at the end of sun, and that makes the word own. Heliopolis. I've talked about that in my Eisenman series, in my book, The Crimson Thread. And it was the place where another temple was, another Hebrew temple in Egypt, in On, Egypt, in Heliopolis. Heliopolis means city of the sun. That's what On means too. Heliopolis is the Greek version. On is the Egyptian. But sometimes the Hebrews would use Egyptian. But when they made it in their own homeland, when they got there, they called it Beth Shemesh, house of the sun. So On has something to do with all of this as well. A continuation of God's program and of God's understandings given to us. As a matter of fact, I still use it once in a while. Some of you are probably aware of it. I use a quote from the Bible as a motto for one of the things I do, and of course most of you will know what it is. When I say it, it's that it is the glory of God to conceal a thing. It is the honor of kings to search a thing out. Here we are. Kings and priests. If somebody can't talk to you like this and explain these things to you at a deeper level than what you've been hearing in churches for years and years and years and years about, you got to be saved, and there's all this, you've got the just to say the name, and you're going to be okay. All of those things. No, you've got to perform. You've got to do something with it. Grace has its limitations because, as I explained a few minutes ago, your mom doing your math work for you, you're going to fail when the test comes. Let's take it down another step. In Genesis, it says, "In the beginning, God made man, male and female, in his image." And everybody wants to go, no. God doesn't deal, there's no women in heaven, there are no females. Oh, how does that make you women feel? King Roy Slippery Slope you were on? Hey, William Joseph Eck, maybe you ought to study more. Male, and I've talked about this before, is Zakar. Zan, which is sword, Kaf, which is palm of the hand, and Resh, which means head, of course, as we talked about just a few minutes ago. It basically means sword in the hand of somebody with a conscience, consciousness. Zakar is a male, and it's in the first chapter of Genesis, and in the second. Zakar, what is it about that? It's the Zan. What does a guy have? He has a shaft. Okay? I hope all the people here are adults. So this is describing the male. Zakar. A sword. A shaft. A staff. That's what he has, right? Well, let's look at female. Female is this word here, nakebal. And I've talked about this before. What is the root of that? The root of that is, it means puncture, penetrate. You all get the picture? So right from the beginning, in the first chapter of Genesis, we're told what males and females really are. The question is, was it only here? Or is it fastened after the place that we came from? Greg Braden and other scientists say that this is a simulation in the sense that, not like a computer simulation, some of them would like to put it that way, but that we're somehow a reflection of what the real world is. You women are very special, despite what people say happened in the Garden of Eden. All right. And before I get to the Paleo Hebrew, which is kind of going to be the end of all this, and then I might take some questions. There was a question because of the Book of Enoch and some other things. It appeared that there were no females in heaven. Well, I think we've pretty well discounted that. If there aren't any, there's no heaven. Okay, just put it down that way. But I've got this little box down here because there's been this argument from the Book of Enoch, as they said, oh, God apparently told the fallen angels, well, you have eternal life, so you didn't need wives, Well, then why are they males? And they're definitely considered to be males. Are there females in heaven? Are there female angels? Well, angels is another thing. It depends upon what category of angel you're talking about. You all know that there are cherubim and seraphim, just as an example. And then there are the sons of God. And the sons of God, it doesn't say daughters of God anywhere, does it? It's by intimation. And Dr. Michael Heiser and I would disagree on this, but I'm on firm ground. When Israel numbered its population, it only counts the males of military age. It doesn't count the females, and it doesn't count the children. It's no different in heaven. That was let's just say, not even heaven. That's the other life, okay, the other side of this. This is immortality where we experience some things and judgment is suspended. Are there females as females? Are there women as women? Damn right there are. And if there isn't, there is no such thing as heaven. The women aren't mentioned because they have a different role. It talks about the Queen of Heaven in the Old Testament, doesn't it, Felicia? It talks about the Queen of Heaven. It doesn't deny that she exists, and she's been interpreted to be Asherah and Ashtar and, some others. But God doesn't deny that there is a Queen of Heaven. It's just the Israelites were told, you can't worship the Queen of Heaven. Are there female angels? What does angel mean? It means messenger. I'm not saying that there aren't women out there that haven't had, women come to them from the other side. I know that's happened. It's happened to me. I think most of you know that story. I told it some time ago. It just means messenger. But that's not really a female role. That's a male role. And that's why most of the angels are male. In the Council of Heaven, you can read it in Psalms 82. This is an example. That council is only males because that's their role. It doesn't mean there aren't females attached to them. They're just not there at the time. That's not their role. They have a different role altogether. All right. Now we're going to get into the Paleo Hebrew. Remember I said there was something special about this bot, this daughter. House of the Cross. In the Paleo Hebrew, this bot is spelled like this. Okay, these are the Paleo Hebrew letters that came down from the Thamudic, not the Phoenician. That's finally being understood now. The Phoenician wasn't the original origin. It wasn't the origin of the Hebrew language and alphabet. Phoenician actually came after it from the Thamudic that they used apparently at Mount Sinai, which Hebrew is a form of, but descended from the Thamudic at Mount Sinai. And this is the Paleo Hebrew. This is the bait. This is the tav. What does the tav look like? It's pretty obvious there. It's a little hard to see here. It's real obvious there. Do y'all see that? That Tav there, that cross? Why is that in that daughter's name? I think most of you have probably heard the saying that woman is the crown of creation. And so many of you have thrown your role and your crown away for the enticements of the world. And a lot of you are regretting it at this point. And those of you who have made that choice and haven't arrived at the point where you're going to regret it, think that you're okay, but it's going to catch up to you. In the normal contest, in the normal understanding of the spiritual and physical worlds, they're explained as two parallel lines, pretty much. Spiritual isn't in the physical, and the physical isn't spiritual. You don't meet God until you leave the body, and then you're in the presence of God. All that kind of stuff, right? So it's shown to be parallel. Well, guess what? In this, if you believe the Bible, if you believe in what you study there in Genesis and other places, if you're a Jew or a Christian or even a Muslim, and there's some things similar to this also in some other religions, but we're not going to go there tonight. That's incorrect. You don't have the spirit world here and the physical world here, and there's no interaction. In this mortal sphere, there is a chasm, there is an abyss between us to some extent, so that we are left to our own devices and find out who we really are. But the fact of the matter is we're told that they're actually connected. The spiritual and the physical worlds are connected. That's why it's the cross. So it's not parallel like this. It's a cross like this. The spirit and the physical intersect, and you are proof of that in your body right now, your spirit being there. The crucifixion of Christ, a lot of people talk about what they think it means, salvation, he saved you from your sins, all these things. The real bottom line is, if you believe in the resurrection, which I do, I think the shot of Turin is obvious. I do have a question of who this Jesus was. Traditionally, and the extant version of him I think is incorrect. But regardless of all that, what did he do? He brought the physical and the spiritual together at this point here and made them inseparable. The spirit was perfect. It was time to raise the physical to perfection so that it could go back to Eden. But we have to do it in a mortal state because we have to know what our reward is. If God pronounced judgment, we wouldn't think that's too fair. Oh, some people say, yeah, whatever God says. But if you judge yourself and you know where you end up, then there's no question because you have to be honest with yourself. But the real truth of the matter is they're interconnected. And they're right here. It's right here. I've talked about Alpha and Omega, Aleph Tav, in former videos in my religion series. One eternal round, Alpha and Omega, Aleph and Tav. That's God's system. No? Guess what? It's right here. In Jehovah, Father, Mother, Son, Daughter. Father is Ab. The first letter of this whole thing here is Aleph. What's the last letter, ladies and gentlemen? Tav. Alpha and Omega, using Thashrak Tamor and the Tarakan, is in the name of God, Aleph, Tav, and everything in between. Emet is Aleph, Mem, Tav. Well, there's the Mem right there. Truth. One eternal round. I am the beginning and the end. Our creation as men and women, ladies and gentlemen, is not alterable. It's what God made us to be. I'm not getting into whether Jesus was really a Jew. If you read my book, I have some questions about that, but we're not gonna talk about it tonight. He was probably actually an Ephraimite. He was even accused of being a Samaritan, by the way. And I don't think that was just a slander on the Jews' part against him. I think they knew who he really was. So what we have here is all the fortress to prove why I am so adamant about the man-woman relationship and why we must not fall for the lies, the whims, the machinations, the evil that's being promoted all over. And it really even gets down to the state interfering with marriages. You know, I'm not going to get into that, but they do more harm than good. I was listening to a guy give a little information the other day, and he said, you know, there's a scripture, and I think it's in Proverbs. I'd have to look it up, but it's something like, a foolish woman tears down her house. A wise woman builds it up. In other words, they're not constantly looking for grass is greener on the other side. But Roy, you say men do that too. Yeah, they do. But remember roles, ladies and gentlemen. Roles. Remember, you have, especially the women, you have a responsibility to the cross, to the joining of the consciousness maturation process, understanding right and wrong, preparing to live an honest and good life. To the young ones, or just to set the example. One of the reasons why I decided to do this, of course, was my tribute to Carol, my wife Carol, who died back in 2008. You can see the video of my celebration of her and her remembrance on this channel, of course, under videos. And she was exactly the Proverbs woman, whose worth is beyond the price of rubies, who husband's heart can trust in her. She was the epitome of that. And how do I know? Because I've been through the ringer on those who were not that way, and she was the epitome of it, of being the proverbial woman in every way, shape, and form. That, ladies, is where you want to be. Don't listen to what's going on about this other stuff. You know, you can get out into a man's world. I'm not saying that you might, sometimes you might have to, but you should always be seeking to become the house of the cross, the fortress that God placed here to help his children grow in safety, security, knowledge, experience, and morality. The fortress is the family. The fortress, and it can vary a little bit, as I've talked about ad infinitum on this channel in a lot of ways. I'm not going to get into that again, but what they're pushing now is Baphomet and Moloch worship. It's not the fortress, and we're seeing the results of it now and what's happening. And as I read in my book here, why is it that back in 1985 they could say the state, the rights of the state represents the collective expression of moral aspirations, and there is an undeniable interest in ensuring that its rules of domestic relations reflect the widely held values of its people. only when it serves their purpose, the state's purpose, because now you see they're trying to push it the other way. And again, there are some exceptions. Some states are fighting against this. They're going to have to get together. And we're not here to talk about the political ways to accomplish that tonight. Okay. Hold on a second. I don't want to have to come up onto the camera to look at the chat, so I'm going to bring it up. I didn't want to bring it up until now because I might lose the Wi-Fi when I do this because it's really weak. All right, so if I lose you, I think I've given the basics about what I wanted to bring tonight. And again, what is God's fortress? It's in His name. YHVH. Father, Mother, Son, Daughter. Ab, Bain, Beit. And it even has the Alpha and Omega. Aleph, Tav. The fortress is right here. The fortress is the centerpiece. Remember, God made man male and female. And when Adam was in the garden, God said, it's not good for man to be alone. We should make a helpmeet for him, right? So the basic unit is the father and the mother. This, the father and the mother, is the fortress. Right there. Beit Mem. It is the foundation. It is the refuge. Can we mess it up? Yes, because we're mortal and we're sometimes stupid. But regardless, that's where it is. One last thing there. I've talked about the name Adam, which was the name of both the man and the woman. They were Adam. God made man and female, or male and female, and called their name Adam. Adam means God through a door into mortality, into the water world. But it also means something else. I think you can see it. Does anybody know what the word for blood is in Hebrew? I'm just going to go ahead and ask it. Anybody know what the word for blood is in Hebrew? I don't want there to be too much dead space here. It's Dam. It's in the name Adam. Right here. Aleph, Dalet, Mem. If you break it down by Notaricon, Adam, Aleph, Dem, Aleph, Dalet, Mem, it means God's blood. His family. God's blood. And God made of one blood all the nations of the earth. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. All right, I'm bringing up the chat now. I might lose you. I want to thank you for being here tonight. This was pretty in-depth. I could go a lot deeper. I could show you a lot more correspondences here. Sorry about that. But I think I've given you a taste of, I take this stuff seriously and I've gone into depth. And it's why I am so, again, I'm so adamant. And I'm so discouraged, not really discouraged, but, well, I guess that too, upset that especially Christianity has had so much wrong, especially about this man-woman relationship, where they call it a necessary evil even. I'll tell you about my dad. My dad was a really great man. I could tell you a lot about him, but he was the baby of the family. He was number 7 in the family. And my grandfather and my grandmother were disheartened. That's a good one, Sheila. Thank you. Were Baptists. Special breed of Baptist, but I'll just say Baptist for now. And when my grandmother got pregnant with my dad, the preacher said that, why did you get on your back again for your husband and be the whore? That's a devil child. Yeah, he said that. And after my dad was born, he still remembers this. He was about 5 or 6 years old. Well, he died in 2004 at the ripe old age of 89. But he still remembers when he was in church and the preacher condemned his father for fathering him and the mother for bearing him and said that he was a devil child. Do you see what's happened? This is in Christianity. I know some people say, no, that's not the case. Hey, I've been warning for a long time that your belief that the man-woman relationship is only for here and that we become androgynous or whatever is actually looking forward to the god Baphomet or Moloch. And you're caught in that and you go along with it because sex is one of the things that people try to control. Your money, your sex, your freedom. A right is a responsibility. What is a responsibility? It's your ability to respond. You have a right to have an ability to respond. You have a right to make contracts between men and women on your own, no state involved, not even a priest. You have a right to make contracts on your own. And if you do it right and you abide by your vows, whatever they are, God will sanctify it. And I can promise you that. Okay, let's see what we got here. All right, I won't take this too long because we've been going for over an hour. I'm surprised is it been only an hour? Oh my gosh, yeah. That's good. Okay, let's see if I can catch up on some of these things. Things would have been, Craig Jacob says, things would have been much different if Adam just said no. He couldn't say no. You know, a lot of people want to put, I remember my mom even doing this. Mom said, you know, if Adam and Eve had just done the right thing, we wouldn't be in this mess. I've told you Adam proved, it's right here. For this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife. Not just divorce her because she makes a mistake. And vice versa. She shouldn't do the same thing. Back in the old days, you know, women didn't have, you know, quite the say-so they do now. And frankly, I wonder if maybe that wasn't a better system. But regardless, don't come down hard on Adam and Eve. Look at this. What did I just show you Adam is? Adam. God, through a door, the veil, into this world. God. Adam in Luke is called a son of God. And the name Adam, which you can also say means ruddy, of course, because it's red, right? It literally means God's blood. We were supposed to have this experience. And the law, Felicia might not like what I'm about ready to say here, but the law was for the lawless. Who are the lawless? The fallen angels. Paul kind of had that right. Not quite. Almost. I'm not going to go there tonight. But yeah, I probably won't go there tonight. All right. I mean, can you imagine being given a set of rules that you keep so busy every day, having to clean up little things, 11 to Passover? You know, you have to, you know, only go so far on Sunday. You know, you can only, you know, you got to do so many different sacrifices. You got to do this thing. You got to do that thing. What do you do to an unruly child? What's the best way to discipline them? Keep them so damn busy they can't get into trouble. And even giving that to them, sometimes it doesn't work, like it didn't with Israel, time and time again. Chores, yeah. Thanks, April. Yeah, exactly. To be a son of God, you have his spirit in you. I hear Derek Bros talking about that, and he's right about that. He's absolutely right. But it's also for the women, Derek. Because where did women come from according to Genesis? And I know that you have some issues. If you're listening to this, I suspect you are. You have some issues with the Hebrew scriptures, and I understand with Jews in general. I understand that. Um, but it says that the woman was taken out of man. Now, I don't think it's literal that God cut him open and took out, his rib and all that. This is allegorical. It has to do with family. It has to do with getting a wife, not by a foreign nation. But whatever. The point is that woman came out of man. So literally, she has the same blessings as the man because God called their name Adam. They're inseparable. You can't have woman without man. And I talked about what God does in that regard. All right. All right, let's see what else we have here. Chris Hickson, yeah, God made XY and XX chromosomes and made us totally complete by that very action. Yeah, and notice that, and I talked about this many, many years ago. I'm not saying God, went in there and took out, you know, a needle or whatever, and took out the chromosomes from Adam and then formed. I'm not saying that happened, but notice that a woman has two X chromosomes. She can't form a male because she doesn't have a Y chromosome. It goes back to this cross thing here. The male has the XY. A man can make a woman. He can make an XX, right? A woman can't make an XY. She has to get that from the man. All right. Ooh, it's getting warm in here. All the lights and stuff. See, there's a lot of dogmatic stuff that I'm seeing put on here, and I'm not going to address it all. But I wouldn't limit God too much, ladies and gentlemen. If you're saying such and such can't be this or can't be that, you're just using your dogma, your doctrine that you've been taught your whole life. If God believes in, not only believes, his principle is liberty, right? The perfect law of liberty, which I talk about quite a bit in my religion series and my Eisenman series. James talks about it, love the Lord thy God and love thy neighbor as thyself. I talked about what neighbor is and all that. As long as you are righteous in what you do, God's going to honor it. There are some limitations, but it's not as prudish and as restrictive as the Christians like to make it out to be, or any other Muslims for that matter. It's a thing called sanctification. Sanctification. Yeah, justice, balance the righteous. That's right. Yeah, justice and mercy. Do you know what? Some people are going to say, well, I know where you get this, Roy. Justice and mercy. Chesed and gevura. What's the perfect balance? Does anybody know what the perfect balance of justice and mercy is? Chesed and gevura. I know you know, Felicia. It's tiferet. Beauty. True beauty is a balance of justice and mercy. Disciplining your child, rewarding your child for doing good. Probably knew I was addressing you, Black Knight of God, right? I wouldn't limit things like that. I think you've got to be very careful about doing that. And somebody on here said, I was way off, and I've been accused of being a heretic and a blasphemer and a pariah and anathema, all those things. You don't understand this, do you? Those of you who attack me that way, those of you who read the founding father, the church fathers, and think you got it all figured out because of what they said, do you know this? Hebrew scholars don't know this. Well, Roy, where did you learn it? Wouldn't you like to know? Yeah, James Marnick, that's exactly right. God's name is written into our DNA. Greg Braden is um, he's kind of new age, but I don't discount all new age stuff. I think that's a mistake. It's not all Gnostic. It's not all hocus pocus. There's a lot of truth to it because of the idea of God being inside of us, and that's true. It is written in our DNA. The Yod He Vav He is written in our DNA. They did a study on it's actually a geometric study, but it adds up, and chemically, it's in our DNA. You're absolutely right. Um, God's differs slightly, according to Greg Braden. There's one element that's in his body. Yeah, he says he has a body, and I believe he does. Um, I mean, if Jesus was resurrected, if you believe Jesus was resurrected, then God has a body, right? So, at any rate, but there's a different element in there. Instead of carbon, there's something else. But the code is still the same. What about Canaan? We're not going to get into that tonight. If Jesse is on here, he can talk to you about it. But it plainly says that that God would put enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, enmity. But Adam said that Eve was the mother of all living. If you get the nuance of that, it tells you a lot about what happened, whether allegorically or real, or just Shakespeare. It's there. Oh, that's interesting, April. Oh, good. My daughter's middle name is Justice, and I call her my beauty. Yeah, justice and mercy are beauty to Ferret. Legacy of Catastrophe, you're asking if it came from Parthenogenesis. That's basically um, that's basically the story that and I know people say, well, that's not what the Bible and the Genesis says. Well, it's there, but it's shrouded. It's very similar to the story of Abraham when he went to Pharaoh's court and he said that Sarah was his sister because he didn't want Pharaoh to kill him. Right? Very similar to that story. And the same thing happened with the other king. It's escaping now. It starts with an A. Anyway, Abraham did that twice. And I did a whole series on the virgin birth and all of that, and the Immaculate Conception. All that's in my religion series. You can go look it up. And I know there are hundreds there now, but they're all worth going through. Um, the idea of the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit descending, I've just shown you. Bane, a son who has the Spirit of God in him. Bane, a house of the Spirit of God, is a son. And it just means that it doesn't mean that Mary never had sex, and I've talked about that before. It doesn't mean that. It definitely means that God directed. I mean, if he could, got to remember, in my view, God follows his own rules. Okay, he sets up the rules like the family structure, and he pretty much sticks to it. Right? There might be some exceptions, but that's not one of them because if Jesus had been born without an earthly father, that's parthenogenesis. That's serpent. Didn't happen that way. And Jesus had to be married, or otherwise he would have denied the fortress. No, I don't think there's a coup going on in Russia right now. There's a lot. There's a lot of idiotic stuff happening on both sides right now. This is why you go here. This is why I did this today. One of the reasons. This is your anchor, not the United States government, not Russia, not not Trump, not DeSantis. This is your fortress. This is your anchor. This is your refuge that God put here for you. This is it. Separate yourself from all of that and return to this. Men and women, but the women really have to start worrying about this cross thing, or mankind could be destroyed because of your lack of concern, consistency. What's that statement? How does that go? Um, the future, the future is determined by the hand on the cradle, something like that. Something like that. Well, Michael T. Buffo, I covered that subject too. He says God's word is an allegory. Understanding the similitudes of the word is key to salvation. Remember, those who believe good and evil come from the same source are damned. That's not true. God said, I created good and I created evil. And if and if evil exists and God is almighty, he's responsible for everything. The buck stops at his throne. So who's responsible for it? It kind of comes down to, what do you mean by evil? The real word is tragedy. When you translate it, it really means tragedy. It means uh, kind of like the movie, unexpected consequences. Am I bugging out? I wish. You got to remember, I got a lot of kids. See, when Carol died, as a matter of fact, I got to tell you this story. My brother's in-laws, um, his father-in-law died in April. His mother-in-law died just last week. Do you see how quick that happened between those two? They were so tight. They were so close. So Carol understood me really well, and I know I talk about her a lot. If you don't understand why, go look at my remembrance video on her. And that was incomplete. I didn't want to, the mind can only absorb what the seat can endure. So I didn't want it to be too long. But I could have gone on for hours with all the different things that we had done and what she said and how she ran things and her love and her all that. But when she died, I thought I wasn't going to be far behind. But she came to my daughter Elizabeth. I've talked about that before, I think. I was in bed one night. It was probably a couple months after she died, maybe not quite that long. It's in my journal. I don't remember the exact date. And I felt this little pinch on my hip. I was in bed, and I felt this little pinch on my head, just like Carol used to do. She'd come up and she'd pinch me on the hip and say, we're connected at the hip. We're inseparable. Well, I felt this little pinch on my hip, and I was really feeling down. I said, that's wonderful, but I'm really thick right now. If that's really you, go talk to Elizabeth. And right away, Elizabeth, who was about 10 at the time, my youngest, started chattering, and I could hear her in the room. So I got up out of bed, walked outside, got to her room, and I didn't bother her. I just stood there, and she's just chattering away, and I can hear she's talking to somebody. Then she stops, and she turns to me, and she said, "Oh, Dad, Carol wants me to tell you she loves you." And she went back, turned back towards the other side, and started talking again. I had nothing to do with it. And I was going, well, this was like the second or third time something similar to this had happened. So the next morning, I go out to fix breakfast for Elizabeth, and I've told the story before. And she comes out, she has this little cute pink robe, and she has this long blonde hair, cute little thing. If you haven't seen the movie The Crimson Thread on my playlists under films and documentaries, and I know it's kind of amateurish, but at any rate, there's a reason why I did it that way. But you can see Elizabeth in there. She's the angel that comes forward out of the stars in that movie. That's her. And that was about, actually, that was about maybe a year after this event occurred that I'm talking about. So she comes out for breakfast the next morning, rubbing her eyes on her little pink thing, and she sits down. I didn't want to, lead the conversation. All I said is, "Well, how'd you sleep, honey?" And she goes, "Oh, Daddy, I was in a fire." "Daddy, I talked to Carol last night. She came in and we were talking and we were having a good." There we are. All right. So what's this about females? Legacy of Catastrophe. You're welcome. Oh, good. Okay, Craig Jacob. Okay, he says, "Roy, I wasn't condemning Adam. I was not just sticking up for Eve, but I do understand this was all the way things had to be." Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Um, there's, I think there's a lot of hidden information there, and I've kind of alluded to it before, and it goes back to the name Chava, Eve. It goes right back to that. And I don't want to go into that here. Some of you will know what I'm talking about to some extent, but uh, it was the greatest love story ever told. Adam loved Eve so much that he was not going to be left in Eden without her. He just wasn't going to do it. Again, and for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother, and they twain shall be one. They shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Sweet and spicy. Well, that's very kind of you to say. Uh, I didn't follow the traditional. I started out. My parents. They got me to go to different churches and things like that. I was a Jehovah's Witness when I was first a little guy, and then Catholicism, and then I went out on my own to find things. Bottom line is where did I learn all this? I've told the story before, but I don't want to sound too grandiose because I've made lots of mistakes. I've done a lot of terrible, terrible things. But I had an experience in 1978 that has to do with this right here. I was told that I'm one of those. And those who have heard me tell the story before will know what I'm talking about. And from there, I didn't. I got the spanking, but I still didn't do what I should have done in the long run. But regardless, I was introduced to these concepts because of that. Paul claims, which is one of the reasons why I know Paul the Apostle is lying. Paul says that he was on the road to Damascus. Which Damascus? It wasn't Damascus, Syria. Damascus means cup of blood. He was actually going to the Qumran community at the Dead Sea. I talk about all this in my religion series, and Robert Eisenman explains it. But Paul says, he's riding along there and he's going to go kill these Christians, put them in chains and all this. And all of a sudden he has this vision, and he tells two versions of it. One is, the guys with me heard a voice and saw a light, and the other one is that wasn't the case. Paul can't keep his story straight because liars don't. But at any rate, he says that he had this communication with this, and you know the story. Saul, Saul, why dost thou persecute me? And then, go to this house when you get there and look up this and whatever. One of the reasons why I finally, because I believed that story early on, even up, through my early 20s, until this event happened to me, and then I realized Paul's making this up because he's trying to get into the inner circle of the Jerusalem community, and I talk about that in my religion series. But anyway, where did I learn it? It was because of that incident that happened to me in 1978. That's it, April. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Boy, isn't that the truth? And there it is, right there. And right here, Isha. Okay, we've been going for. How long have we been going? Doesn't tell me on that. An hour and a half. I think I probably filled your minds and hearts with a lot of information tonight, and some of you aren't going to like it. Rhonda Dean, that's one of the things about mortality, and this is a good point. Rhonda Dean says, "At present, I don't have a refuge of safety, only my Father." And you mean God, and I understand that. But in this world, this was the pattern, and of course, Satan attacked it. Death came into the world. Satan attacked it. He's split up families. He's, wars, destruction, all to destroy this. That's my point. If your fortress, if your refuge has been taken from you, yeah, you're pretty much left with just trying to have this communication with God. But God's plan was to have you have this fortress, and it was evil people that got in the way. Mortality. We've gone through this system quite a few times. We've had a situation where the spirit, well, that's the whole idea. The spirit and the physical are to intersect and to become inseparable. We're given this experience of mortality in this physicality. Oh, I miss Carol. I miss my daughter Rachel. She drowned when she was 15 years old in an accident on a church outing in a river. I miss my mom and dad. My brother died a few years ago. My first wife Denise died of a heart attack. Carol died of cancer. A nephew of mine died from this last. And I do miss him. And even though I have been blessed to have some contact with them and know they're not demons, people say, yeah, that doesn't happen. Those are demons. No, they're not. I mean, that could happen, but after this event here, when that happened to me, I certainly, I mean, I could still be deceived, but you can tell the difference between somebody that loves you and somebody who's trying to fool you. So at any rate, I miss them, and I've had. Oh, I'll tell you about this one. So I was sleeping in bed one night, and I was sound asleep, and something grabbed me and shook me. I mean, literally. I mean, the whole bed. I mean, I'm not dreaming this. It woke me up, and I'm being shaken, and I hear this voice, and it says, "Roy, lighten up," because people that know me know I'm a pretty serious character. Oh, I can have my good times and laugh and all that, but I take things pretty seriously. I think you can tell that, like me giving my remembrance of Carol 15 years later, right? My heart's like that. So anyway, and I jump out of bed, and I go, "What the heck was that?" It's July 5th. On July 12th, I get a call from my sister-in-law. She says, "Roy, your brother died." I went, "What?" She says, "Yeah, they just found him today, the 12th. But he died the night of July 5th, the very night that he shook me, kind of like a, goodbye, don't take things so seriously, lighten up." How could I have known that? I couldn't. I just told you about the thing with Elizabeth and Carol, and Carol had come to me at least once before, maybe twice. She's kind of been away here for a while now. I think because she knows how much I miss her, and that, as she often said, and I put it in my remembrance to her. I said, where she said, "A woman is a distraction," you know. And then I told her, I said, "Well, she's supposed to be a distraction sometimes, and she's supposed to be an inspiration to others, and you're the perfect balance of it." So I think, and then I had a dream about her one night where I don't know what happened to me. I kind of remember something occurred, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but I ended up in this really beautiful place, and I opened this door, and Carol's in there, and it looks like a big library, and she's reading books, you know. And she looks up at me, and she doesn't say, "Hi, Roy, I'm glad you're here." No, that Carol knew things, and so what she said to me is, "You're not supposed to be here yet. What are you doing here? You've got things to do." What are my things to do? My kids. My kids are the things I still, I mean, they do more for me now than I do for them, but, you know, I can see where I needed to stick around for them. When she died, I was sure I was going to be out of here within a few months. And I think if it hadn't been for these other concerns, I probably would have been. And I could tell you some other stories about that. But another thing she said is, and I told you this, you can't remain alone, Roy. You've got to find another lady. And I look, but and I'm not so, you know, I'm not looking for something exactly like Carol. Of course not. That's impossible. But uh, because of all the horrible things that have happened to me, my name's, you know, demeaned, and you know, my reputation attacked and all that. Hell, I'd do better if I'd had a mistress like General Petraeus did. I'd be honored by the world, right? But you know, they go on there and they see my Google when they Google my name, and they get the YouTube thing and the Twitter, of course. But they also get my books, and then they also get all the news coverage that I had years ago, and then all the slanders and libels that are thrown at me. So they never even, you know, they get concerned, and they don't want to. Hey, Roy, let's sit down and talk about this. You know, let's go have coffee or breakfast or whatever, and let's hear your story, and let me find out from the horse's mouth what really happened. So Carol hasn't had anybody come up to any kind of standard yet. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, most likely Jesus was born in around Yom Kippur. You're right, James Barnick. That would make sense. Sweet and spicy. Your oldest daughter's called Elizabeth as well. That's a good name. It means God. Elizabeth. It's Eli. It's God. God's house. Right. God shall provide a house. Sheila Doyle. Again, don't confuse what I'm saying here. Yeah, of course, God is your final fortress, but He intended us to have this fortress and to defend it here. If you have a fortress, you're going to have watchmen on the wall. You're going to defend it with all your might. This was the fortress that God wants us to be involved in. Not putting Him aside. This is His pattern, and that's what my point is. And it's being rejected by the Western Christian nations right now. Supposed Christian nations. Yeah, Michael T. Buffalo, I think that's probably the real story. He's saying that Paul was confronted by the apostle Barnabas was the light that knocked Saul Paul off his high horse. Yeah, it could be. But see, then what you're doing is you're doing what really happened with the virgin birth too, which I think probably has a lot of merit to it. Yeah, Jeannie Rose, you know because you've lost your husband and your son, if I recall correctly. I'm so sorry, Jeannie. You and I have talked about that before. Yep, they do visit us right after they pass. Then it gets less as time goes on. Yeah, because they want you to finish out what you're supposed to learn here. That's why they do that. A lot of people say that it's just you know those things that happen right after they're gone are grief hallucinations. Well, I think that probably happens too. But those things that happened to me were, especially the one with Carol going to Elizabeth, was, I mean, that was totally out of my control. I had no control over that one. And being shaken out of bed, that was a physical shake. So But you're right. They don't. They're here, but they don't interfere with you because they want you to finish your schooling, for lack of a better term. And that would be Carol, especially. I remember one day I was writing the Crimson Thread, which I was reaching for the book, but I won't bother. And I was trying to come up with some dialogue for a couple of pages of the book. So I was laying on the couch in the living room, my feet up on the couch. I took my shoes off. She was a stickler about taking your shoes off in the house. And I was leaning back on the armrest, and I'm sitting there trying to go there. And she comes down the hall from the bedrooms, and she says, in her in her in her way, she goes, "And what are you going to do today?" Your husband appeared to you before or after he died, Jeannie? Yeah. Well, it's they love you. The love is never lost, and staying away sometimes is the way they show their love too. Yeah, Jeannie. I understand that. I'm just because she says after her husband died, I wasn't looking, and I'm still not, and that's okay. That's honorable, uh, but it's not a requirement, neither by God nor by your husband, I'm sure. And in my case, Carol, who knows, I mean, she came into my family, right? She already knew what I was like, and she says, "Roy, you can't stay alone. You don't necessarily have to, you know, get this big family anymore, but you know, you need a woman in your life, and that's okay. I want you to do that." I tried to some degree, but my reputation precedes me, and most people don't. They don't know that I know this stuff. They don't know really what I've done. They don't really understand my professional history, my education, my experience, my family. They really don't understand it. They go on Google and they see, the attacks that are made, and they just go with that. But remember, a man is known by his enemies, right? Think about that. Okay, I think we're going to leave it there. Uh, you know, uh, this particular video that we've done tonight, I did as kind of a follow up to my video of my remembrance to Carol, because it's about this relationship and what it can do for us, what it was before we came here, what it's like, what it should be like while we're here, and what it's going to be like after this when we go to the real world. This is the pattern. Whether you believe in the Bible or not, whether you believe that Moses told a story or whether it was some fairy tale like from Ezra or Jeremiah, whatever you think, uh, this formula, I can't see how somebody thought this up. The correspondences, the things about the cross, the intersection of the spiritual and the physical and the consciousness with us, um, the alpha and omega, the fortress. I mean, it's all there. It's all there. And then, like I said, I had that experience here. You don't have to believe this. I don't expect you. I'm not demanding you believe what I say about it. But it set me on this course. Craig Jacob, my father came to me when he passed, and my half brother came to me in a very vivid dream when he passed. Yeah, and I think that's how it works. Yeah, I think that's how it works. When we sleep, we've got that real close relationship with the other side. That's when the veil is the weakest. That's why our dreams sometimes don't make sense to us when we wake up. We think, what in the heck was that? And sometimes that's all they are, just the mind trying to work out some issues. But these things that actually happen, these actual visitations, these actual contacts that we have, We see this through that veil, and when we wake up, it's very difficult sometimes to figure it out. Okay. Michael T. Buffo, reach out to you. I can show you things that will change your entire paradigm. I've been everywhere, Buffo. Um, sorry, Michael Buffo. I've probably been where you are talking about. Okay, I've been everywhere. I appreciate your offer. Start a YouTube channel. Okay, and one of these things, if I ever do some more, tell me what your YouTube channel is, and I'll go there. But I'm not going to make an effort to contact you outside of this. That's almost always been disastrous. And you know, I'm telling you these things, but my experience is so much more vast. It's just that after all of that, all of those other experiences, all those things I've studied, Greg Braden, I've studied that stuff. I've studied, you know, uh, Torah Jews. I've studied Hinduism. I could just go on and on and on. I've decided to settle on this. I'm not saying I'm dogmatic about it, but there are important things here. And you've probably had some significant things for you. Share them, okay? But don't tell me that you've got to give me that stuff. How did you say it? And I think you did it out of the goodness of your heart. It will change my entire paradigm. Put it on a YouTube channel. Let me take a look at it. That's my challenge to you. Start a YouTube channel. If the Word of God is burning in you, you've got to give it out, or it'll burn you up. But don't tell me that you're going to change my paradigm. That's not going to prove anything to me. And just like I'm giving you this information because you can now take it and you can use it for yourself. You can look at it and you can see. You can use Notar, Khan, Tashrak, Tamura, Gematria if you want. You can go back and make these correspondences. You can see it because it's there. All right? So do a YouTube channel, Michael, and show us what you got. You could be right. 50,000 hours of study? Well, what? 500,000 hours of study? Oh, come on. Don't exaggerate. 500,000 hours? I don't think your life's been that long. Hey, I tell you what, though. What do you mean you don't trust YouTube? I don't trust YouTube. I still use it. Put something up. But you don't have to tell your whole 500,000 hours of what you found out. Select what you think is most important for the message for people today and tell me what it is. All right? 50,000 plus hours. That's still an awful lot. That's more believable, though. Yeah, Chris Hickson, you're right. Yeah. Pacifist Christians have got it all wrong. It will happen, Michael. Good. You need to. If you've got a message, get it out. But don't say I'm going to change your paradigm. It's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. It might just do the opposite. So, show us what you got. I'm showing you what I got and where I got it and why I got it. Okay. We're going to cut it down. So the bottom line is the family really is our fortress. The man-woman relationship right here, this is the foundation, the fortress. Before the kids come and after they're grown and leave, this remains. I had one person say, "Oh, you're not supposed to have sex after kids leave. That's because sex is only for kids." Nope. Right not. Kids are the fruit. God made, according to the scripture, God made Eve because Adam, the man, needed a companion. The first reason for Eve was companionship. And then the fruit of that, the children, were the part of the reward. But the children come and go. that doesn't end this relationship right here, which is the male with the zayin, the shaft, the sword, and the woman, the female, then the kebah with perforation, the penetration, the puncture. And it's not evil. That is to control you. In the end, it's still about companionship. That's right. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. I hope that was well worth it. Uh, to get the full impact of this, take a screenshot of this. And I know my handwriting is horrible, but get your Gesenius and your Strongs out. Oh, I'm going to take a drink. Your interlinear Hebrew, Greek, English Bible. Or if you want, and you're not involved in that kind of stuff, go look at Kabbalah. If you're not into that, go look at Hinduism. Go read the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedic. I forget the last term for that, but anyway, the Vedic things. The Kama Sutra, if you want, which I think has a lot of legitimacy. If you know what the Kama Sutra is, it's kind of interesting. It goes along with this male-female relationship, and it's not dirty and nasty. And all that. Some of it might be, but it's about that intimacy. Oh, am I blocking the text? Oh, thank you. Who was that? Iron. Oh, okay, yeah. So there you go. Here, let me do this. I might mess the camera up, so give me a chance here to do this. Then you can take a screenshot of it, okay? How's that? These are some pictures, by the way, over here of my Army and police time. I keep those handy. Okay, so you got all that? There's a good place to take a screenshot. Okay, again, I don't know how many more times I'm going to be doing this. I've been doing a lot of walking, a lot of thinking, a lot of alone time. There's a scripture that everybody applies only to Jesus, but it's really about anybody who is God's son. And I'm not saying this because I'm trying to get sympathy. I'm trying to tell you what happens. It's not just about Jesus. Despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted, not immersed, but acquainted with grief. Your eyes on the horizon, ears to the ground, situational awareness on high. Prep, pray, stay out of the way. You can see where things are going. There's a chance some things might turn around, but a lot of it's just to make you think that something's going to happen. Like with Trump making all those promises and never being able to keep them, never really wanting to keep them. It's false hope. This is your foundation. This is your fortress. God put it here for you. Plant the seeds. Cultivate it. Bring it close to you. Love it with every ounce of your heart and soul. Y'all have a nice time this weekend out here for now.